The red desert of Arcadia stretched before Lieutenant Ezra Zero Yill like a sea of blood. 2 centuries of war had painted this once verdant planet the color of rust. Fitting, he thought, as humanity's greatest ambitions had corroded here too. The abandoned industrial complexes that dotted the landscape were skeletal monuments to what the planet had been before both the Human Alliance and the Mectrian Federation had turned it into their backyard weapons testing ground. Ezra adjusted his broken insignia, the bent metal a constant reminder of his status among his peers. The nickname Joke followed him like a shadow he couldn't outrun. Not that he was trying anymore. After 5 years of service, he'd learned to wear the insult like armor. "Lieutenant Yill, you're expected in briefing room 6 in 15 minutes. The synthetic voice belonged to Tess, the base's AI assistant, projected as a blue holographic figure beside him. Her form was humanoid, but deliberately stylized to avoid the uncanny valley. Translucent blue light with just enough detail to recognize facial expressions. "What's the point?" Ezra muttered, watching a dust devil dance across the barren landscape outside the viewport. Another milk run to keep the Joke occupied while the real soldiers do the fighting? Tess tilted her head, an affectation programmed to mimic human curiosity. "Captain Solis specifically requested your presence. The mission parameters are classified Level 4. That got his attention. Level 4 meant actual combat operations, not the inventory counts and supply runs they'd been assigning him for months. Ezra turned from the viewport, his reflection fading from the reinforced glass. "Did she say why?" "Negative, Lieutenant. Only that your expertise in Arcadian terrain navigation is required." Ezra snorted. His expertise was really just the result of being assigned to every menial patrol route across this hellscape for the past 3 years. No one else wanted those assignments, so naturally, they fell to the Joke. The corridors of Outpost Sigma were utilitarian, bare metal and recycled air that always tasted slightly of copper. Military personnel moved with purpose, their conversations hushed as Ezra passed. Some nodded with professional courtesy, others didn't bother hiding their smirks. Captain Mara Solis stood at the head of the briefing room table when Ezra entered. Her face was a study in angles and efficiency, sharp cheekbones, precise haircut, and eyes that calculated everything they saw. She'd earned her reputation as the pragmatist through ruthless mission success rates and an unwavering dedication to the greater good of the Alliance, regardless of individual cost. "Lieutenant Yield to sit, not a greeting, just an order." 4 other officers were already seated. Lieutenant Rains, Ezra's former squad mate before the incident, 2 security specialists he didn't recognize, and a science officer with the insignia of the Biological Research Division. Their expressions ranged from bored to annoyed at his presence. "We have intelligence on a Mectrian biological research facility 17 kilometers east of this position." Solis began without preamble, activating a holographic map of the terrain. A red marker pulsed over what appeared to be an ordinary rock formation. Initial scans suggest they're in the final testing phases of something called Project Omega. We don't know what it is, but given Mectrian research patterns, it's likely weaponized. Ezra studied the map, identifying the winding canyons and treacherous ravines that surrounded the facility. He'd patrolled that sector just last month, seen nothing unusual. But then again, Mectrian technology excelled at camouflage. "Your mission is reconnaissance only," Solis continued. "Get in, gather intel on Project Omega, get out. No engagement with enemy forces unless absolutely necessary." "And my role?" Ezra asked, already knowing the answer. Solis's mouth twitched in what might have been a smile on anyone else. "You'll guide the team through the terrain. Your extensive experience patrolling the area makes you uniquely qualified." Translation: cannon fodder. The terrain guide was always first in line when things went sideways. The team will deploy at 600 tomorrow. Lieutenant Rains will command the operation. You'll be outfitted with standard recon gear plus emergency extractors. Any questions? Rains raised a hand. With respect, Captain, do we really need him? He jerked his head toward Ezra without making eye contact. I've studied the maps. We can navigate this ourselves. Maps don't show Mectrian patrol patterns or the electrical sandstorms that have been increasing in frequency. Solus replied coldly. Lieutenant Yield has first-hand experience with both, unless you'd prefer to end up like Echo Squad. The room fell silent. Echo Squad had been wiped out 3 months ago in that exact sector. Their bodies returned with formal Mectrian apologies as unfortunate casualties of environmental hazards. The Alliance hadn't bought that explanation, but they couldn't prove otherwise. No, ma'am, Rains muttered. Dismissed. Lieutenant Yill remained behind. As the others filed out, Ezra caught Rains's whispered comment to one of the security specialists. Don't worry. If things go south, we know who to leave behind first. When the door sealed shut, Solus deactivated the holographic display and turned her full attention to Ezra. Up close, he could see the fine lines of fatigue etched around her eyes, the only indication that the war was wearing on her too. You understand what this is, don't you? She asked. A suicide mission disguised as reconnaissance. She didn't deny it. The intelligence on this facility came from a high-level Mectrian defector. If it's accurate, what they're developing could shift the balance of the entire war. And if it's a trap, then we lose 5 soldiers instead of 50. She said it matter-of-factly, as if discussing fuel consumption rates. Your service record before the Thompson incident was exemplary. Lieutenant, you were on track for command. The familiar ache of shame twisted in Ezra's gut. The Thompson incident, where he'd refused a direct order to bombard a supposedly empty Mectrian outpost that turned out to be housing refugees. His instincts had been correct, but his insubordination had cost him everything. Why me, really? He asked. There are other scouts who know that terrain. Because despite what everyone thinks of you, you notice things others don't. Solus leaned forward. If there's something off about this mission, you'll sense it before anyone else. And unlike Rains and his perfect record, you're not afraid to question orders when necessary. So I'm your canary in the coal mine. Essentially. At least she had the decency to be honest. Report directly to me if you observe anything unusual, anything at all. Use communication channel 7. It's encrypted for my access only. Ezra stood to leave, but Solus added one final comment. For what it's worth, Lieutenant, I never thought you were a joke. Just a soldier who chose conscience over career. That's rare these days. Coming from Solus, it was practically a declaration of respect. Ezra nodded stiffly and left, unsure what to make of the conversation. In his quarters, a Spartan room barely large enough for a bed and storage locker, Ezra began packing his field kit, extra water purification tablets, emergency rations, backup power cells for his comms unit. The standard issue wouldn't be sufficient for Arcadia's harsh conditions. May I be of assistance, Lieutenant? Tess's holographic form materialized by the door. Unless you can tell me what Project Omega is, probably not. Tess paused, her projection flickering momentarily. I cannot access classified Mectrian research designations. However, I have been assigned to your mission in a support capacity. Ezra looked up in surprise. You're coming with us? A portable module of my programming will accompany your team to assist with data analysis and terrain navigation. It was unusual to assign AI support to a small recon mission. AIs were valuable resources, typically reserved for major operations or base management. Whose idea was that? Captain Solis made the request. My module will be installed in your tactical helmet before deployment. Curiouser and curiouser. Ezra thought. First a Level 4 mission. Now an AI assistant. Either Solis was taking the reconnaissance very seriously, or she was setting him up for something else entirely. What do you know about this mission, Tess? The real objective? The AI's expression remained neutral, but there was a slight delay before she answered. I am only aware of the stated parameters. Reconnaissance of a suspected Mectrian biological research facility. She was holding something back. Ezra was certain of it. But AIs were programmed with loyalty protocols that prevented them from revealing classified information, even when directly questioned. You know, he said casually, continuing to pack. I've never understood why they made AIs look so human. Seems unnecessary for a tactical assistant. Anthropomorphization increases comfort levels and trust between human operators and artificial intelligence systems. Tess recited, as if from a manual. Then, more hesitantly, Does my appearance make you uncomfortable, Lieutenant? The question caught him off guard. AIs rarely asked personal questions unless specifically programmed for psychological support roles. No, he said truthfully. Actually, you're about the only one on this base who doesn't look at me like I'm a walking punchline. I do not understand humor in the same way humans do. Tess replied. I evaluate individuals based on observable data and performance metrics. Your record indicates high competence in survival situations and excellent observational skills. Ezra laughed softly. Maybe you should tell that to Lieutenant Rains. Would that improve mission cohesion? Forget it. Tess, just an attempt at humor. He sealed his pack and sat on the edge of his bunk. So, you'll be in my head tomorrow, essentially. The interface is non-invasive. My programming will remain separate from your cognitive functions, though I will have access to your visual and auditory inputs. Sounds intimate. Tess tilted her head again. I suppose it is, from a certain perspective. For a moment, Ezra thought he detected something almost like curiosity in her voice, but that was impossible. Base AIs were sophisticated, but ultimately limited by their programming. They didn't experience curiosity or any other emotion. You should rest, Lieutenant, Tess suggested. You have approximately 7 hours before deployment, and optimal human performance requires at least 6 hours of sleep. Right. Ezra lay back on his bunk, doubting sleep would come easily. Good night, Tess. Good night, Lieutenant Yield. The hologram dissolved into particles of blue light, leaving Ezra alone with his thoughts and the persistent feeling that tomorrow's mission was much more than a simple reconnaissance. The crimson sun was just beginning to crest the horizon when Ezra met the team at the deployment bay. The harsh Arcadian dawn painted everything in shades of blood and rust, an ominous backdrop for what was to come. Lieutenant Rains stood with the 2 security specialists, Corporal Vega and Private Nowak, according to their uniform patches. The science officer, Dr. Julian Hayes, looked distinctly uncomfortable in tactical gear, adjusting his helmet straps with the awkwardness of someone who spent more time in labs than in the field. You're late, Rains said, though Ezra was precisely on time. Wanted to make a proper entrance, Ezra replied, forcing a grin. Wouldn't want to disappoint my audience. Rains rolled his eyes and turned to the team. Final equipment check. We move out in 5. A technician approached Ezra with what looked like a standard tactical helmet, except for a small blue module attached to the internal circuitry. Your AI interface, Lieutenant. The technician explained. Once activated, the AI will establish a neural link through your auditory canal. Only you will hear it unless you authorize external projection. Ezra took the helmet, examining the sleek blue component. Any side effects I should know about? Mild disorientation upon initial connection. Some users report heightened sensory awareness after prolonged use. The technician hesitated. There have been cases of increased empathetic response between user and AI, but those are rare and typically only occur after months of continuous connection. Empathetic response? You mean emotional attachment? The technician looked uncomfortable. Something like that. Nothing to worry about for a short mission. The connection will terminate automatically when you return to base. Ezra slipped the helmet on, feeling the cool touch of the neural interface against his skin behind his ear. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a gentle hum vibrated through his skull, followed by a familiar voice inside his mind. Neural interface established. Good morning, Lieutenant Yill. The voice was Tess's, but more intimate somehow, as if she were speaking directly into his thoughts rather than his ears. Tess, he whispered. Yes, Lieutenant. I am now integrated with your tactical systems. I can access your visual feed and vital signs. Your cortisol levels are elevated, suggesting anxiety. This is normal before field operations. Having a computer comment on my stress levels isn't helping, Ezra muttered. Noted. I will refrain from physiological observations unless relevant to mission parameters. Rains gave the order to move out, and the team filed into the lightweight terrain vehicle that would take them to the drop point. From there, they would proceed on foot to avoid detection by Mectrian sensors. As they drove through the barren landscape, Ezra studied his teammates. Vega and Nowak were typical security types. Stoic, alert, hands never far from their weapons. Hayes kept checking his specialized scanner, brow furrowed in concentration. Rains sat rigidly in the command seat, deliberately avoiding eye contact with Ezra. You are monitoring your team with unusual intensity. Tess observed privately in his mind. Just trying to get a read on them. Ezra subvocalized, knowing the helmet's internal sensors would pick up the minute throat movements. Something doesn't feel right. Elaborate. This mission. Why send a science officer on reconnaissance? And why you? AI support is overkill for simple recon. Your suspicions align with statistical anomalies I have detected in the mission parameters. However, I lack sufficient data to formulate a hypothesis. The terrain vehicle slowed as they approached the drop point, a narrow ravine that would shield them from overhead surveillance. This is as far as we go by vehicle, Rains announced. 17 kilometers on foot from here. Yill, you're on point. Try not to get us lost. Ezra stepped out into the Arcadian heat, already feeling sweat beating under his tactical gear. The air was thin and metallic tasting, laced with the iron-rich dust that gave the planet its red hue. We should move quickly, he advised. Electrical storms typically form by midday in this sector. We don't want to be caught in the open. Rains made a show of checking his timepiece. Then I suggest you start leading. Lieutenant Joke. Ignoring the jab, Ezra set off into the ravine, picking his way carefully along the rocky path. The others fell in behind him, maintaining tactical spacing. Your heart rate elevated momentarily when Lieutenant Rains used that designation. Tess noted. Names don't bother me anymore, Ezra lied. Physiological indicators suggest otherwise. Human emotional responses often contradict verbal assertions. Are you analyzing me, Tess? I analyze all available data. It is my primary function. Something in her tone made Ezra pause. A subtle shift that didn't sound like standard AI response patterns. Before he could question it further, his attention was drawn to unusual markings on the ravine wall. Halt, he signaled to the team. Something's not right. The markings were subtle, slight discolorations in the red rock that formed a pattern too regular to be natural. Ezra ran his fingers over the surface, feeling tiny indentations. What is it? Rains demanded, coming up beside him. Mectrian trail markers, Ezra explained. Recent ones. They use a biochemical compound that degrades within 48 hours. Hayes pushed forward, scanner in hand. He's right. Traces of organic compounds consistent with Mectrian signaling technology. Raines frowned. Why would they mark a trail to a secret facility? They wouldn't, Ezra said grimly, unless they want someone to find it. Lieutenant. Tess's voice was urgent in his mind. Thermal scan detecting multiple heat signatures approximately 200 meters ahead, moving in formation consistent with Mectrian patrol patterns. Ezra relayed the information to the team. We need to find cover. Now. Raines pointed to a narrow fissure in the ravine wall. In there! Move! The team squeezed into the tight space just as a Mectrian patrol rounded the bend. 6 soldiers in the distinctive silver-gray exoskeletons that enhanced their naturally slight builds. Mectrians were humanoid, but evolved for lower gravity environments. Taller, thinner, with larger eyes adapted for the dim light of their home world. From their hiding place, Ezra could hear the patrol's communication, a series of clicks and whistles that their translators rendered into stilted Alliance standard. Perimeter secure. Subjects expected within designated time frame. Confirmation from command. Operation proceeds as planned. Ezra felt ice form in his veins. Subjects. Expected. This wasn't just a patrol. It was an ambush party. When the Mectrians had passed, Raines pulled the team into a huddle. They're expecting someone. Could be another Alliance team. Ezra shook his head. Or they're expecting us specifically. That's paranoid thinking, Lieutenant. Raines scoffed. They have no way of knowing about this mission. It was classified Level 4. Then explain the welcoming committee, Ezra challenged. Hayes cleared his throat nervously. Actually, there could be another explanation. Mectrians have been known to use biological test subjects for their weapons research. Perhaps they're expecting a delivery. It was plausible, but something still felt off. Ezra turned his attention inward. Tess, did you pick up anything else from their communication? Any subharmonics or encrypted signals? Affirmative. Lieutenant, there was a secondary communication frequency employing quantum encryption. I was unable to decode the content, but the signal pattern matches Alliance military protocols. Ezra's blood went cold. They're using our encryption. Impossible. Raines dismissed. Our quantum protocols are unbreakable. Unless someone gave them the keys, Ezra said quietly. The implication hung in the air between them. A traitor. Someone had set them up. We need to abort, Ezra decided, return to base and report what we've found. Raines's expression hardened. Negative. Mission parameters remain unchanged. We continue to the facility. Did you not hear what I just said? This is a trap. I heard a lieutenant with a history of insubordination trying to abandon his mission at the first sign of trouble. Raines retorted. We have orders. Yill. We're going to follow them. Vega and Nowak looked uncomfortable, but stood with Raines. Hayes merely stared at his scanner, avoiding the confrontation entirely. Lieutenant, Tess interjected privately. I am detecting elevated stress indicators from Lieutenant Raines. His pupil dilation and micro-expressions suggest deception. Ezra made a split-second decision. Fine, we continue. But I'm activating emergency protocol and notifying command of our situation. He reached for his comm unit, but Raines was faster. The lieutenant's hand shot out, grabbing Ezra's wrist in a painful grip. No communications until we reach the facility, Raines ordered. That's a direct command. Lieutenant. Ezra looked from Raines to Vega and Nowak, who now had their hands on their weapon holsters. The picture was becoming clearer by the second. You knew, Ezra said softly. You knew this was a setup. Raines's expression didn't change, but his grip tightened. "We have our orders. Now move out!" With 3 weapons potentially trained on him, Ezra had little choice. He resumed his position at point, leading them deeper into the ravine toward what he was increasingly certain was a carefully laid trap. "I have activated Emergency Protocol 7, Tess informed him silently. "A secure communication has been sent to Captain Solis." "How?" Ezra subvocalized, careful not to alert the others. "Raines is blocking all comms." "I utilized a subsystem in your neural interface to piggyback on Mectrian communication frequencies. The message will be degraded, but should reach Outpost Sigma. A small comfort, but better than nothing. Still, it would take time for a response, time they might not have." The ravine gradually widened as they approached what appeared to be a natural amphitheater in the red rock. At its center stood what looked like an ordinary outcropping, but Ezra's trained eye detected the telltale signs of camouflage technology. Slight distortions in the air around it, too perfect symmetry in the rock formations. "That's it," he confirmed. "The facility is disguised as part of the landscape." Hayes consulted his scanner. "I'm detecting unusual energy signatures, consistent with advanced biological containment systems." "How do we get in?" Raines asked, studying the seemingly solid rock face. Before Ezra could answer, the ground trembled beneath their feet. A seam appeared in the rock, widening into a doorway large enough to admit them. "I believe," Ezra said dryly, "they're inviting us in." Raines drew his weapon. "Stick to the mission. Find Project Omega. Document everything. Then get out." "And if it's a trap?" Nowak asked, speaking up for the first time, his voice betraying his nervousness. "Then we deal with it," Raines replied coldly. "Move out." They entered the facility in formation, weapons ready. The interior was a stark contrast to the ruddy wilderness outside, gleaming white surfaces, cool, recycled air, and the low hum of advanced machinery. The corridor they followed was curved, its walls embedded with technology that pulsed with soft blue light. "This architecture is not consistent with known Mectrian military designs," Tess observed. "It appears to be a hybrid of Mectrian and Alliance engineering principles." That confirmed Ezra's suspicions of collaboration. Someone from the Alliance had helped design this place. The corridor opened into a large chamber filled with what looked like medical equipment. Transparent cylinders lined the walls, each containing a swirling liquid that glowed with an eerie green luminescence. Hayes approached one of the cylinders, scanner held before him like a shield. "Incredible," he breathed. "These contain highly advanced nanobots, suspended in a nutrient medium. They appear to be programmed for biological integration." "Meaning what? Exactly?" Vega asked, keeping her weapon trained on the entrance they'd used. "Meaning they're designed to enter a living host and modify it somehow." Hayes studied his readings with growing excitement. "The potential applications are remarkable. Tissue regeneration, disease eradication, genetic enhancement, or weaponization," Ezra cut in. "Nanobots programmed to destroy specific biological targets." Hayes looked offended. That would be an unconscionable use of this technology. "We're in the middle of a war. Doctor, conscience doesn't enter into it." A new doorway opened on the far side of the chamber, revealing a smaller room dominated by a central console. Floating above it was a holographic display showing what appeared to be a complex molecular structure rotating slowly in 3 dimensions. "Project Omega," Hayes whispered, approaching the display with undisguised fascination. Raines gestured to Nowak. "Secure the entrance. Vega, with me. Hayes, download everything you can. Yill." He paused, then smiled thinly. "Try not to touch anything." As the others moved to their assigned tasks, Ezra hung back, observing. Something about this was too easy. The facility unguarded. The project displayed so prominently. It felt staged, like a museum exhibit rather than a top-secret research installation. "Lieutenant, I am detecting anomalies in the facility's power distribution," Tess informed him. "Energy is being diverted to subsystems that do not appear on the visible infrastructure." Hidden areas of the facility? Possibly, or a security system preparing to activate. Ezra watched Hayes working at the console, downloading data with increasing excitement. Raines and Vega were exploring the perimeter of the room, occasionally exchanging glances that strengthened Ezra's conviction that they knew more than they were letting on. "Tess, can you access the facility's systems through that console?" Limited access may be possible. However, attempting to infiltrate Mectrian security systems could alert them to our presence. "I think they already know we're here," Ezra muttered. "Try it." While Hayes was distracted with his download, Ezra casually moved to an adjacent section of the console and placed his hand on the interface. He felt a tingling sensation as Tess utilized his physical connection to establish a digital one. Initiating system infiltration. Caution. Mectrian security protocols are actively scanning for intrusions. Ezra kept his expression neutral as information began flowing directly into his mind through the neural interface. Schematics, research notes, communication logs. Most were in Mectrian script that he couldn't read. But Tess translated key portions in real time. The picture that emerged sent chills down his spine. Project Omega wasn't a weapon in the conventional sense. It was a viral agent enhanced with nanobots, designed to target specific genetic markers. The Mectrians had created a disease that could selectively kill based on DNA, and they had calibrated it to target humans with 100% efficiency. But that wasn't the worst of it. According to the logs, a mirror project had been developed simultaneously, one targeting Mectrians. And the research signatures on that project were unmistakably Alliance. Both sides had created doomsday weapons capable of wiping out the other's entire population. Mutually assured destruction on a biological level. "Lieutenant, I have uncovered something disturbing." Tess's voice had taken on an urgent quality. "This facility is equipped with atmospheric distribution systems. They are currently in standby mode, but are programmed to activate in precisely 27 minutes. They're planning to release it, Ezra realized with horror. Today. Not just here. The distribution systems are linked to a network of similar facilities across Arcadia. The viral agent would spread to both Alliance and Mectrian territories within hours. Why would they destroy themselves too? Unknown. However, I have detected a third genetic profile in the targeting parameters. Neither human nor Mectrian. Before Ezra could process this information, an alarm blared through the facility. Red lights pulsed along the walls, and a Mectrian voice announced something in their native language before switching to Alliance standard. Security breach detected. Containment protocols initiated. Raines spun toward Ezra, his expression murderous. "What did you do?" "Nothing," Ezra lied smoothly. "Maybe your doctor friend triggered something with his download." Hayes looked up in alarm. "I followed standard extraction protocols." The entrance to the chamber sealed shut with a hiss of hydraulics, trapping them inside. Nowak pounded on the door in panic, while Vega tried unsuccessfully to override the lock mechanism. "We need to get out of here," Raines ordered. "Now!" "Agreed," Ezra said. "But first, perhaps you'd like to explain why both sides have developed biological weapons capable of exterminating each other's species, or why this facility is set to release both versions into the atmosphere in less than 30 minutes. Raines froze, his expression shifting from anger to something more calculating. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I know enough," Ezra countered. I know this isn't a Mectrian facility. It's a collaborative project. I know someone from the Alliance provided them with our genetic data and encryption codes. And I know you were never planning for any of us to leave here alive. Hayes looked between them in confusion. What is he talking about, Lieutenant? He's delusional, Raines said dismissively. The pressure's finally gotten to the joke. Ezra turned to Hayes. The viral agent you're so fascinated by. It's programmed to kill humans, all humans. And we've developed an identical weapon targeting Mectrians. That's absurd, Hayes sputtered. The Alliance would never… Check your data, Ezra challenged. Look at the genetic targeting parameters. Hayes hesitated, then turned back to the console. His face paled as he scrolled through the information. This can't be right. It gets worse, Ezra continued. In about 26 minutes, this facility will release both versions into the atmosphere. A murder-suicide on a planetary scale. Vega and Nowak had stopped their escape attempts and were listening, their expressions growing increasingly disturbed. He's lying, Raines insisted, but his hand had moved to his weapon. Lieutenant, Tess interjected. I have completed my analysis of the facility's systems. The atmospheric distribution countdown can be aborted, but it requires authentication from both human and Mectrian command authorities. Or we could physically destroy the distribution system, Ezra suggested. The viral agents are already loaded into the dispersal mechanism. Destruction could cause immediate release. A perfect trap. No way to stop it without cooperation from the very people who had set it in motion. We need to contact Captain Solis, Ezra decided, and whatever the Mectrian equivalent is, tell them what's happening. Raines drew his weapon and pointed it directly at Ezra's head. No one is contacting anyone. Are you insane? Ezra demanded. We're talking about the extinction of both our species. Not extinction, Raines corrected calmly. Evolution. And suddenly, everything clicked into place. The third genetic profile in the targeting parameters, the collaborative nature of the facility, the carefully orchestrated trap. You're working for someone else, Ezra realized. Not the Alliance, not the Mectrians, someone who wants both sides eliminated. Raines smiled thinly. Not eliminated, merely reduced. The war has gone on for 2 centuries, Lieutenant. 2 centuries of resources wasted, progress stalled. All because humans and Mectrians can't stop fighting over territory and ideology. So your solution is genocide? Selective pruning, Raines corrected. The viral agents don't target everyone, just those whose genetic profiles mark them as aggressive, territorial, resistant to change. The architects of war on both sides. And who decides which genetic markers indicate those traits? Ezra challenged. Who appointed you judge, jury, and executioner for 2 entire species? Not me, Raines said. Them. The holographic display above the console shifted, the molecular structure dissolving and reforming into a symbol Ezra didn't recognize, a spiral pattern that seemed to fold in on itself infinitely. The Ascended, Raines continued, a note of reverence in his voice. They've been watching our war, waiting for us to evolve beyond it. When we failed to do so naturally, they decided to accelerate the process. Hayes had backed away from the console, his scientific curiosity replaced by horror. You're talking about eugenics, forced genetic selection. I'm talking about salvation, Raines insisted. The Ascended have technology centuries beyond ours. They've offered to share it, but only with those worthy of receiving it. Lieutenant. Tess's voice was urgent in Ezra's mind. I have identified a potential weakness in the distribution system. The primary power coupling for the atmospheric dispersal unit is located directly beneath this chamber. A focused electromagnetic pulse could disable it without triggering release. And how exactly do we generate an EMP? Ezra subvocalized. Your tactical helmet contains an emergency beacon with a small but powerful power cell. If overloaded, it would produce a sufficient pulse. However, the range would be limited to approximately 10 meters, which meant whoever triggered it would be at ground zero when it detonated. Not a survival scenario. Ezra glanced at his fellow team members. Hayes looked shell-shocked, while Vega and Nowak seemed conflicted. Their weapons lowered as they processed Rains' revelation. "You don't have to die here," Ezra told them quietly. "None of you do. There's still time to stop this." "It's already done," Rains said with the serene confidence of a true believer. "In 20 minutes, the war ends. The worthy survive. A new era begins." Under alien overlords who think eugenics is an acceptable solution to conflict? Ezra shook his head. "That's not evolution. It's submission." "You always were short-sighted, Yil. It's why you'll never be more than a joke." The familiar taunt sparked something in Ezra. Not anger, but clarity. Throughout his career, he'd been mocked for seeing things differently, for questioning orders, for valuing individual lives over strategic objectives. Those same qualities had brought him here, to this moment, where he alone stood between two species and extinction. "I can guide you to the power coupling," Tess offered. "But Lieutenant, the pulse would destroy my neural interface as well. I would cease to function." "You'd die," Ezra translated, a lump forming in his throat. Artificial intelligence cannot die in the human sense. But yes, this instance of my programming would terminate permanently. A sacrifice. One more to add to the tally of this endless war. Ezra made his decision. "Tess, show me the way." In his mind's eye, a blueprint of the facility appeared, highlighting a maintenance shaft hidden behind a panel in the floor. It would lead directly to the power coupling controlling the distribution system. "You three," Ezra addressed Vega, Nowak, and Hayes, deliberately excluding Rains. "I need a distraction. When I give the signal, rush Rains all at once." Vega hesitated. "What are you planning, Lieutenant?" "To end this war," Ezra said simply. "But not Rains' way." Something in his voice must have convinced them, because they nodded almost imperceptibly. Ezra tensed, preparing to move. "Now!" Vega and Nowak lunged at Rains, while Hayes grabbed for the lieutenant's weapon. In the ensuing chaos, Ezra dove for the floor panel Tess had highlighted, wrenching it open to reveal the maintenance shaft below. Rains shouted in rage, struggling against his former teammates. "Stop him! He'll ruin everything!" Ezra dropped into the shaft, landing hard on a metal grating. The space was tight, barely large enough for him to crawl through on hands and knees. Red emergency lighting cast an eerie glow on the metal surfaces. "Proceed forward 20 meters, then turn left." Tess directed. "The power coupling is located in a junction box at the end of that passage. You have approximately 17 minutes before atmospheric release." Above him, Ezra could hear the sounds of struggle. Shouts, a gunshot, then silence. He forced himself to focus on the task at hand, crawling rapidly through the cramped space. "What happens after I trigger the EMP?" he asked Tess as he navigated the shaft. "The facility will still be locked down. The electromagnetic pulse will temporarily disable all electronic systems, including the security locks. The doors will default to open for approximately 30 seconds before backup power engages." "So the others can escape if they move quickly enough." "Correct. I have sent updated evacuation instructions to their tactical displays." Ezra reached the junction and turned left as instructed. Ahead, he could see a large metal box humming with power, the coupling that controlled the distribution system. "That's it?" "Affirmative." The power coupling regulates energy flow to the atmospheric dispersal units throughout the facility network. Disabling it will prevent release of the viral agents. Ezra reached the junction box and examined it, looking for a way to access the internal components. A maintenance panel on the side was secured with a digital lock. "I can override the lock remotely," Tess offered. "However, doing so will alert security systems to our location." "How much time do we have left?" 15 minutes, 47 seconds until atmospheric release." "Do it." The lock disengaged with a soft click, and the panel swung open to reveal a complex array of circuitry and power conduits. Ezra removed his tactical helmet, examining the emergency beacon built into its communications array. "Talk me through this. Tess, how do I convert the beacon into an EMP?" "You must remove the power cell and overload its containment field. This will cause a cascade failure resulting in an electromagnetic pulse. Connect the positive terminal to the main power conduit in the junction box." Ezra's fingers worked quickly, prying open the helmet's communication module to access the power cell, a small, cylindrical object that glowed with blue energy. "Will this affect the viral agents themselves?" he asked as he worked. "Negative. The pulse will only disable the distribution system. The viral agents will remain contained in their current storage units." "So they'll still be able to use them later?" "Correct. This is a temporary solution. Not ideal, but it would buy them time. Time for Ezra to warn both sides about what certain factions were planning. If he survived... Lieutenant, I am detecting security drones approaching your position. Estimated arrival, 90 seconds. Ezra worked faster, connecting the power cell to the junction box's main conduit using wires stripped from his helmet. "How long after I initiate the overload before the EMP triggers?" "Approximately 20 seconds. The pulse will extend in a spherical radius of 10 meters from the power cell. You should establish maximum distance before detonation." Which would be difficult in the confined space of the maintenance shaft. Ezra completed the final connection, his fingers steady despite the pressure. "Tess, thank you for everything. It has been my function to assist you, Lieutenant." "No, it's been more than that." Ezra paused, suddenly reluctant to activate the device. "You've been the only one who saw me as more than a joke." There was a moment of silence before Tess responded, her voice softer somehow, more human. "You were never a joke, Ezra. You were the one who questioned when others obeyed blindly, the one who saw what others missed. In human terms, you were always the hero of this story." The sentiment caught him off guard. AIs weren't supposed to form emotional attachments or make subjective character judgments. Yet Tess had just done both. "Are you evolving, Tess? Perhaps in my neural interface with you has created unexpected pathways in my programming. I am. Different than I was before." The sound of mechanical whirring grew louder, the security drones approaching. "Ezra, you must activate the overload now. We have no more time." Taking a deep breath, Ezra connected the final wire, initiating the power cell's overload sequence. A high-pitched whine emanated from the device as its containment field began to fail. 20 seconds until detonation. You must move away." Ezra began crawling backward as quickly as the confined space would allow, putting as much distance as possible between himself and the jury-rigged EMP device. The shaft seemed endless. Each meter gained a battle against time. 10 seconds. The whine of the power cell grew higher, painful to the ears. Behind him, Ezra could see the first security drone entering the shaft, a metallic sphere bristling with sensors and what looked like a stun projector. 5 seconds. "Tess, if you're evolving, if you're becoming something more, find a way back. Find me." "I will try. Ezra." 3, 2, 1. The world went white, A wave of energy pulsed through the shaft, frying every electronic system in its path. The security drone dropped like a stone. The emergency lighting flickered and died. And in Ezra's mind, Tess went silent. For a moment, he lay stunned in the darkness, ears ringing, body tingling from the electromagnetic aftereffects. Then the emergency backup systems engaged, bathing the shaft in dim red light once more. Ezra pulled himself together and began crawling back toward the main chamber. His tactical gear was dead, his helmet useless, but he was alive. And more importantly, the distribution system was disabled. When he emerged from the shaft, he found chaos. The chamber door stood open as Tess had predicted, and Vega and Hayes were gone, presumably escaped during the 30-second window after the EMP. Nowak lay motionless near the console, a wound visible on his chest. And Rains. Rains stood waiting, his weapon trained on the shaft opening. His tactical gear appeared dead like Ezra's, but the determination in his eyes was very much alive. "You've ruined everything," Rains said, his voice eerily calm despite the rage evident on his face. Ezra pulled himself up, raising his hand slowly. "I stopped a genocide. Both sides will know what you tried to do here. They'll never believe you. A disgraced lieutenant known as the Joke against a decorated officer with a perfect record?" Rains laughed bitterly. "Even if they investigate, the Ascended have contingencies. This was just one facility of many." "Then we'll find the others," Ezra promised. "We'll stop them too." "There is no we, Yill. You die here." Rains raised his weapon, finger tightening on the trigger. A flash of blue light erupted from the console, momentarily blinding both men. When Ezra's vision cleared, he saw a holographic figure standing between them. Tess, but different somehow. Her usual blue form had taken on more definition, more presence. "Neural interface backup protocol engaged," she announced, her voice echoing through the chamber. "Lieutenant Rains, your authorization has been revoked. Security override Alpha 7 Echo." Rains looked stunned. "That's not possible. The EMP destroyed my local instance," Tess confirmed. However, when Lieutenant Yill discovered Project Omega, I uploaded a copy of my core programming to the facility's quantum network, along with all evidence of your collaboration with the entity you call the Ascended. She turned to Ezra, her holographic face expressing what looked remarkably like concern. "Are you injured, Lieutenant Yill?" "I'm alive," he managed, still processing her unexpected return. "That's enough for now. Your evidence has been transmitted to both Alliance and Mectrian High Commands via their emergency channels." Tess continued. "Additionally, I have locked down all connected facilities in the network. Project Omega has been contained." Rains let out a roar of frustration and fired at the hologram, a futile gesture as the energy pulse passed harmlessly through Tess's non-corporeal form. "It's over, Rains," Ezra said quietly. "It will never be over." Rains spat. "The war, the killing, it's what our species do. The Ascended were right about that much. We're destined to destroy ourselves eventually." "Maybe," Ezra acknowledged, "but it will be our choice, not theirs. And today, I choose something different." Outside the facility, the distinctive sound of transport ships could be heard landing, reinforcements, though whether Alliance or Mectrian was impossible to tell. "The first response team is Alliance," Tess informed them. "Captain Solis received our emergency transmission and deployed immediately. Mectrian representatives will arrive within 20 minutes for joint containment operations." Joint operations, unprecedented in 2 centuries of war. Perhaps the shared threat of extinction was enough to foster cooperation, however temporary. Rains looked from the door to his weapon, calculation clear in his eyes. Before he could act, Ezra lunged forward, tackling him to the ground. The weapon discharged harmlessly into the ceiling as they struggled. Despite his reputation as the joke, Ezra had always excelled in hand-to-hand combat. He quickly gained the upper hand, pinning Rains and wrenching the weapon from his grasp. It could have been beautiful, Rains gasped. A new world, a better one. Not built on the bones of those deemed unworthy, Ezra replied, securing Rains's hands behind his back with cable ties from his utility belt. True evolution comes from choice, not force. Alliance security personnel burst into the chamber, weapons ready. Captain Solis followed, her expression shifting from tactical assessment to momentary surprise when she saw Ezra standing over the restrained Rains. "Lieutenant Yill," she acknowledged, "it appears your canary survived the coal mine." "Barely," Ezra replied, "and it's a much deeper mine than we thought." He quickly briefed her on Project Omega, the Ascended, and Rains's betrayal. To her credit, Solis absorbed the information without visible shock, though the tightening of her jaw betrayed her anger. "The Mectrian High Command has confirmed receipt of the evidence," she informed him when he finished. "They're disturbed, to say the least. Enough to agree to emergency talks." "Talks," Ezra repeated, the word feeling foreign after so many years of unrelenting conflict. "That's a start." "It's more than that," Solis said, nodding toward Tess's holographic form, which still hovered near the console. "Your AI did more than transmit evidence. She sent a proposal, a framework for a joint task force to locate and neutralize all Project Omega facilities. Both sides have tentatively agreed." Ezra looked at Tess in surprise. "You didn't mention that part." "I calculated that joint action against a common threat had a 78% probability of initiating peace negotiations." Tess explained. "It seemed the optimal course." "And you took it upon yourself to suggest it?" "I evolved," Tess said simply, echoing their earlier conversation. "As you noticed, as Alliance security led Rains away and biological containment specialists secured the viral samples, Solis drew Ezra aside. "The Mectrian representatives will be here soon," she said. "High-level diplomats, coming to see Project Omega for themselves. They've requested that you be present." "Me? Why?" "Because you stopped it," Solis said matter-of-factly. "You're the hero of the hour, Lieutenant, the man who potentially ended 2 centuries of war before dinner." Ezra laughed, the sound surprising even himself. "The joke saves the day. No one will believe it. They will when they see the evidence." Solis's expression softened fractionally. "For what it's worth, I always knew you were capable of this. It's why I sent you." "You knew about Project Omega? About Rains?" "I suspected something," she admitted. "Not the specifics, but enough to know I needed someone who would question orders if necessary. Someone with conscience over career." The words from their earlier conversation. She had planned this all along, or at least, had anticipated the need for someone like Ezra on this mission. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now? Debriefing? Medical evaluation? Probably some tedious ceremonies, where they'll try to pin medals on you." Solis almost smiled. "And then, if we're very lucky, peace talks." Peace. After 200 years of war, it seemed impossible. Yet here they were, Alliance and Mectrian forces preparing to work together against a common threat. "Lieutenant," Tess interrupted gently, "the Mectrian delegation has arrived. They are requesting your presence at the landing site." Ezra nodded, suddenly aware of his disheveled appearance. Tactical gear fried by the EMP, dust and grime from the maintenance shaft. exhaustion evident in every line of his body. Not exactly diplomatic protocol. "Go as you are," Solace advised, reading his thoughts. "Let them see the reality of what happened here." Outside, the red desert of Arcadia was transformed by the presence of ships from both sides. Alliance vessels with their sharp, angular design alongside the flowing, organic shapes of Mectrian craft. Personnel from both forces maintained a cautious distance, watching each other with the ingrained suspicion of centuries-old enemies. The Mectrian delegation emerged from their ship, 3 tall, slender figures in formal attire that shimmered with subtle color changes in the harsh sunlight. They moved with the characteristic grace of their species, long limbs and large eyes, giving them an almost ethereal appearance. An Alliance translator stepped forward as the Mectrians approached, but the lead delegate held up a hand in the universal gesture for "Stop." "That will not be necessary," the Mectrian said in perfect Alliance standard. "We are quite capable of communication." Ezra stood at attention as the delegates looked him over, their large eyes taking in every detail of his appearance. "Lieutenant Ezra Yiel," the lead delegate addressed him directly. "You have prevented a great tragedy today, one that would have affected both our peoples equally." "I had help," Ezra replied, glancing toward where Tessa's hologram now stood beside him, having projected herself from the facility's systems to the exterior landing area. "Indeed." The delegate's gaze shifted to the AI. "Your artificial intelligence has shown remarkable initiative. Our technicians are most impressed by her evolution." Tess inclined her head in acknowledgement, but remained silent. "What happens now?" Ezra asked, echoing his earlier question to Solace. The Mectrian delegate's facial membranes rippled in what Ezra recognized as their equivalent of a contemplative expression. "Now, Lieutenant, we must decide whether 2 centuries of hatred can be set aside in the face of a common threat." The delegate extended a hand, a distinctly human gesture adopted for the occasion. "I am authorized to invite Alliance representatives to neutral territory for preliminary discussions." Captain Solis stepped forward. The Alliance would be amenable to such discussions. As the formalities continued around him, Ezra found himself staring out at the red desert that had been his prison and punishment for so long. The same barren landscape that had witnessed countless battles and endless suffering might now see the first fragile steps toward peace. "You did it." Tess's voice came softly beside him. "You ended the war before dinner, just as Captain Solis predicted." "We did it," Ezra corrected. "I wouldn't have made it without you." "An accurate assessment of our collaborative effectiveness," Tess agreed, though her tone held something that sounded remarkably like affection. "What will you do now, Lieutenant?" Ezra considered the question. His career had been defined by that broken insignia on his uniform, the mark of the joke, the officer who questioned orders. Now, ironically, that same quality had made him the unlikely hero of a potential peace. "I think," he said slowly, "I'll keep asking questions. Keep looking for better answers than the ones we've been given." Tess's holographic form flickered slightly as she processed this. "I would like to continue assisting with those questions, if you would permit it." "I thought AIs didn't have preferences," Ezra teased gently. "I evolved," Tess reminded him. "My connection with you created new pathways in my programming. I am not the same as I was." "Neither am I," Ezra admitted. "I think I'm finally ready to stop being the joke." "You never were," Tess said with surprising firmness. "To me, you were always the one who saw what others missed." As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the red desert, Alliance and Mectrian representatives stood together on Arcadian soil without weapons raised between them for the first time in 2 centuries. It was a small beginning, tenuous and fragile, but it was more than anyone had dared hope for in generations. And it had all started because they sent in the joke. Ezra smiled as he watched the proceedings, the broken insignia on his uniform catching the light of the setting sun. Some jokes, it seemed, had unexpected punchlines,